Hi there. I'm Mark Roach, and this is the first edition of Marx Headroom. This is an experiment. This is a channel, a platform where I'm taking the chance to speak raw from my experience in life, which has, well, for those of you that have heard me on other platforms that I've put myself out on, like Transcendent or FutureWise, I've had a pretty interesting life. A lot of people tell me I need to write a book, and I don't believe that a book is another book is what the world needs. I think we have enough of those, and I think what I have to say and what I've done in my life, not that I've accomplished anything that might be recognized in the world, but I have found a way to bring something to the people around me in my life, and I'm trying to find a way to convey that on film and get it out there through media to share with other people. So here I am. And to be full disclosure, is that what they say today in our age of transparency? I'm filming this from a camera. It's not an iPhone, so it's probably not distorted in the way that you're used to seeing distortions today on the web or on TV. But so much of us have gotten used to this iPhone, or whatever, Android or camera distortion. So this is not AI. This is just Mark's Headroom raw. But I'm shooting this on an FX30 Sony camera in a room in the Ozarks right now where I grew up. And the camera, ironically, is the lens is like between the legs of a Raggedy Anne doll. And don't read a lot into that. This just kind of happened. I needed something to keep my attention up off of my computer, which is down here, and onto the camera. So that's a reminder to look into your eyes and speak who I'm speaking to. And ironically, let me just put this out here. So many of us are repeating our old patterns in life that we do find ourselves almost acting like dolls or like robots that are just simply repeating patterns. And I have to get a little bit off topic here and just say, I think that a lot of us are going to have a chance to escape those patterns as if we have learned to watch ourselves and work with what God has given us and let some of those old patterns be repeated by the machines that are evolving around us and use those to our advantage. And so in that sense, I'm not afraid of artificial intelligence, because I think what we've worshiped has been almost like through education and large institutions, maybe some elite institutions, is basically just patterned thinking rather than raw and creative thinking. So that's my a little bit of where I come from here. But let me tell you, what I'm going to do here on this platform is try to be original, real, and authentic, and I don't know where I'm going next. And interestingly, this has been a theme in my life. Even though I've been, I've started companies, I've had over $1 billion in, and that sounds like something that most people might be using to brag, but I hope it does get your attention and keep your attention. But I'm going to ramble here a bit and just say, I've been around the world and I've come back to many of the places where I suffered trauma, and I've never been one to shy away from revisiting those old places, because that's just the way that I roll. And this started early in my childhood. And if you want more about some of my personal history, I speak about that on my YouTube channel called Transcendent. And I've got another channel that I started this year called Future Wise Energy, where I speak to some of the things that I learned in the oil and gas business, being around some business leaders. But much of my personal practice in life, now that I'm 61 years old, is around keeping my physical body and trying to restore some things that kind of fell apart, maybe more than once in my life. Those of you that know me closely know that I've been struck by lightning and I survived that. I've also drowned to death and I'm still here. And I've also suffered a number of other, what most people would consider to be setbacks in life that I just considered to be, now that looking back, about necessary steps and lessons. And it's not like I'm trying to achieve anything like goals that many people might set for themselves. So, but I am trying to live a life that seems aligned with my calling, and which seems to be a deeply spiritual practice for me that I'm called here to try to share with others. So, although I may seem like I'm rambling, I am. And if you're tuned in, then maybe you'll follow me down some of these rabbit trails and it will evoke something that is meaningful for you, because I'm not a Stephen Covey person, like, trying to begin with an end in mind, like I have a way that I want to manipulate you to get a dollar or your attention or whatever. If you feel like watching, then watch. And if you don't, then, this isn't for you. And maybe if it's not for you today, there'll be a time in your life where I'll leave this up here on maybe YouTube or some other platform where you can come back to it at the right time. Timing is everything. And I'm in the now right now. And I'll tell you what, some of the feedback that I've had over the years, and this goes back into the 90s when I was working with some people that were running the oil and gas business in the world, that were very powerful people, lawyers and financiers and oil men. And they noticed that I had this spark and they liked it and they wanted to control it. And I didn't want to be controlled. So I ran, kept following this calling. And, it may have come off at times like a rebellion against them, but really it was just this calling that I've had. And through that, I've raised 8 kids, 3 of my own, on my 3rd long-term relationship right now. And, life keeps unfolding in ways that I don't fully understand, but I respect, learn, and love. So I like this medium because it brings me in contact with people through more of the senses than I can find a way to reach than like just through my writing. And I'm a good writer, so I can write things, but I'm not necessarily a great actor, or I probably would have, jumped on some Hollywood bandwagon and been part of some producer's series of shows to bring attention and to get attention to the programming or some theme that would sell soap, so to speak. So, but back in the 90s, whenever I was in the oil business, I was also following another calling in my spare time, or actually what to me was the real time, was in a lot of times it was psychological, counseling or therapy that I threw myself into, because nothing that all the normal people were talking about really made sense to me. I could coexist in that world and this other world that I was examining at the same time. And I was taking notes in the world where I was making these observations and then questioning much of it with trained psychologists and psychiatrists and and mystics and, healers and preachers and highly educated, kind of like, but very linear minded people in their own. And I would juxtapose all this stuff and try to make sense of it. And so I was also a very good athlete, and I used that as a practice to try to stay true to myself and my body and my calling, and to keep myself fit, because I think everything on earth here does have a physical origin, and we can't deny that. But in the 90s, I was pursuing not only a living to support a wife and 3 kids at the time, and using the oil business to do that, I also began honoring my need to communicate and explore my emotional life and my calling through therapy and also through film acting. And I got a lot of feedback from acting in contrived circumstances, and using that feedback on how I felt. And I was trying to basically juxtapose all the feedback that I was getting in life into one unified solution. And it made me crazy. And it created a lot of tension in me. And I've learned to live with this tension. So in the 90s, all of these things were operating. And I ended up going around the world when I left one kind of corporate job in Fort Worth and began traveling the world and running workshops under the guise of being an expert petroleum engineer and management consultant and software guru. And this is in the 90s. So I was going into these different cultures around the world where oil and gas was very powerful and prominent, and helping other people up their game and do some of the things that I was able to do as a petroleum engineer in reaching across geology, land, using all this time and depth dependent data to work with it on a computer in front of me. And in the oil business, the cool thing is that it is something that is quite fascinating, because it merges community around the oil fields with what's beneath the earth, with the resources that have been deposited there, which have their own signature. And of course, they are affected by the ways that we interact with them or draw them out of the ground. And I was pretty good at modeling all of that stuff, and was interested in getting in front of people to communicate, help them use their tools better. So when I went into these workshops, one of the feedback that I had from the collective, so to speak, as I went into different cultures, because each little culture, not little, but I mean the major cultures of the world seem to operate. They have a different language, a different tone. There's a different structure to the thoughts and objectives on each continent. And then as you get in different positions on each continent, you can see differences as to how people are processing information and thinking and or not. And so one of the interesting things that I heard from around the world unilaterally was that, Mark, you seem to have a mastery of all of this information and procedures around oil and gas, as well as you have this ability to anticipate what the group and what the individual needs. But you don't seem to really have it seems like you don't really know what you're going to say next. And that's very true. It took roll forward 30 years, and I'm in studying with a Meisner trained acting coach who had studied with Stanford Meisner herself back in the probably the 80s and in New York City. And so this person, after I've studied with her for about 5 years, she finally said, "Mark, you don't look like you're someone," although she knew my past as being a CEO and, having positions in business and having been a great athlete, um, said, "You don't look like you're really trying to control anybody." And it was almost a confession because, no, I wasn't. I'm just here trying to convey what's coming through me. And I really don't know what I'm going to say next or do next in many cases. And the, an honest answer, someone asked me what I do for a living, and sometimes it's taken the wrong way, but when I say whatever I want, that sounds so arrogant and it sounds so odd, selfish. But what I've learned is that most people are so entrained on objectives that are very self-serving that that is something that a lot of people should be ashamed of, because those shallow objectives, built on competition and built on putting the other person down and getting it to the front of the line, are the things that, we really should be ashamed of, and we should try to find ways around. So I've been putting some new information out on my Transcendent channel that speaks to that, about going small, as well as on Future Wise Energy, where I speak to some of the writings of this guy named Schumacher, who wrote this book in the 70s, 1973, I think it was published. Economics as if people mattered. Small is beautiful. And so anyway, I wanted to point that out today, but I was going to make this a space where I could just be myself. And rather than writing a book or trying to tell people how to how to be, or even try to entertain people, I'm hoping that there's enough people that are interested in this approach to life that this might be something that people would tune into, maybe go to sleep to, but somehow it would trigger something of meaning, for people, rather than something that, began with um, like, this is a get rich scheme, or this is a how to get more likes on your Instagram or Facebook, or how to be more popular, or how to get sex, or how to basically abandon yourself, because I'm all about authenticity. So I've got a computer here, and I'm going to look at some things some notes that I made. And, and I'll tell you something. I've noticed that, like, on Fox and CNN, for example, they'll have things that go across the screen, and they seem to be some movement that doesn't seem to be necessarily in concert with any particular message. Like, the only function is to maybe entrain people's brains to basically just keep watching, because that's where, they really are benefiting by capturing attention. So I'm going opposite here and taking a risk that maybe something deeper inside of you will grab onto, what I'm delivering here, and stay tuned. So one of those things I did examine this week was, about using hypnosis in this Max Headroom channel to keep people entrained. And, there, as I used artificial intelligence, which I commonly do, to examine research topics, um, I found that, it was warning about the ethics and the effectiveness of it, really actually varies. So although many of us hear about, the masses being, these, what do they call them? Conspiracy, conspiracies and so forth, that I do believe in the human spirit and that there are very authentic pieces of us that do see through the hypnosis. And some of us are very aware of it. But the real loss is that no one has come forward with a way to help survive it consciously. Many of the people that I know will acknowledge it. It's kind of like a doctor that I know. I started talking to him about being sexually molested. And I could tell that he had been himself. And I think he felt like there was no alternative but just to bury it and try to go on. That there was no way to really deal with that. It was just something that he had accepted, and that was smothering him. And I think that's the way a lot of us live, is we don't have an alternative to. It's like if you deal with this, well, then that takes time and that hurts and nobody's really going to care. Well, a lot of the values around not dealing with it are what keeps mankind repeating these old patterns that we've been repeating for forever. So thanks for walking down that rabbit hole with me. I've got a note here of find what others are looking for. Well, this is a channel where Marx Headroom, where I do want to pay attention to what people are saying or commenting, if anyone does have the nerve to comment, because what I found is a lot of times they'll look at the number of likes the channel has had and some of the other comments, and they're really reluctant to say anything, or they feel intimidated, or they don't want to expose themselves. So one of the interesting observations I've made as I've played around with social media over the past 10 years is that people do feel a lot more free to comment on TikTok. There's a lot of very anonymous usernames out there, and people will comment under that guise. So I'll listen. If you care to name who you are and be authentic and kind of own your comments, I would consider that most noteworthy. But if not, I do tend to look at the nature of what I invite and deal with that. So I'm open to that. But I am looking for what others are looking for and what others need that I might be able to bring forward. And just so you know, I'm speaking to you right now. I've been doing this particular type of fasting practice for, I think I'm on my over 3 years. I'm near 4 years of doing this. What I do is I don't eat for 5 days, and then I eat carefully for 2, and then I repeat. And I've been doing this over and over and over and over again. So right now I'm on the last hours of a 5-day fast. And I found that there's a lot of energy and a lot of epiphanies that, I'll do some writing and I'll make some videos and I've tried to mine my body and my circumstance the best I can for something to share with others. And since this is the first episode of Mark's Headroom, I wanted to lay that out there and just be live. And, this is totally unscripted, except for what I'm going to pull up some notes here about various things that I've been examining this week and share them with you. And so that's what I do every week is I fast and then I eat a couple of days. And a lot of people are very confused by that. And I can't really tell you exactly how I came across this particular way of living, other than it's evolved Since my days in athletics in my teens, I began doing some fasting and various types of athletic training. And because I was encouraged to play three sports, baseball, basketball, and football, like a lot of guys my age in the US, um, I tried to learn to change my body for each one of those sports. And my father was a Marine and also a well-schooled psychologist and criminologist and community leader. And he just gave me a lot of insights as to what might be possible with the human potential, along with being raised in a very um, strong Bible-based um, church and home environment. So a lot of that I resisted, or it would look like I was resisting at the time, but actually I think I probably got a lot of that stuff or understood a lot of it better than most people around me. But like I was talking about earlier, there's not that many people that have really mastered life and found a way to live with the realities that we face in the world and also deal with the spiritual and also the physical truths that we own in our bodies as we live here on earth. So that's why maybe you might want to tune into Mark's Headroom, because I can share some insights there, and I can't necessarily, as I'm speaking to the camera, peering out between Raggedy Ann's legs here, I can't tell you exactly what would help you. But given some time and some interaction here, maybe we can figure that out. Because what I found is in those classrooms or the workshops that I had years ago, there was an authenticity, there was a sincerity that I did bring that people noticed. And I try to work from my heart and to be real with people. And the fact that I will admit that sometimes causes people to dismiss me. And what I found is I keep going, and eventually, the real power that I have been blessed with of perseverance and some intelligence, pattern recognition, you might call it, has helped me survive things that most people do not. And so I can speak with confidence from that. And I have enough confidence that there's resources around that usually arrive at the right time to answer the questions that people do have. So I can promise you that has been my experience in the past, and only hope that I could find a medium to convey that in the future. Um, Let me speak to a few notes that I've got here, and then I'm gonna turn this off. One note here is Jesus eliminated the need for martyrs, so sacrifice is no longer necessary. It's the illusion of victory by violence and dominance that prolongs the hell for the majority of people here on earth. And it also suspends a bubble for an elite class of people here on earth. So the more you're dealing with life, I think the closer you are to really experiencing complete satisfaction. A lot of people will wait until they're on their deathbed, and then all these realizations, begin to come to you. Maybe some regret, maybe some confession that you feel like if you believe in this singular afterlife, that you need to confess these things to some priest or somebody to have a home there in heaven, to avoid going to the hell afterwards. So I'm going to leave some of that with you to ferret out, because whatever your faith or religion or beliefs are, that may strike a chord with you. But I do think that there is a universal sense of love and a lot of confusion around forgiveness and control and fear that operates in a very powerful way in life today. And I'd like to figure out a way to convey some understanding and what some people might consider to be wisdom around that with others. So that's Mark's Headroom for today. This is August 22nd, 2025, signing off. Shooting through Raggedy Ann's legs. I found this Raggedy Ann, by the way, in the closet in this room with Raggedy Ann has a dress and she's wearing what looks to be like these pants, and the pants were pulled down around the ankles, just so you know.